P Diamond here in Jacksonville, Florida, and today's job on the Troybilt TB30R is to replace the drive belts, otherwise known as the transmission belts. Now, like an idiot, I should have had one of these in stock because getting these belts turned out to be quite a challenge, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But the symptoms I was having was when you turn the mower off, the brake clutch pedal would shudder, and every once in a while I would put it in drive and let the clutch pedal out and it wouldn't go anywhere. And if I changed the speed selector switch a couple of times, then it would operate just fine. So if you're having either of those two issues or any drivability issues, probably need to go ahead and get the belt if you plan on doing this job yourself. Now, I will give you a warning, this is not an easy job, so watch the video and then you can decide for yourself if you're going to tackle this on your own. Okay, the first step is going to obviously be to remove the grass chute if you have that, or if you have the bag extension, which is what I have sitting over there. You're going to want to get rid of all of that, and then this is going to require us to remove the deck. So let me get set up for that. So the first step is going to be to remove the blade belt, and in order to get that out we need to take this nut off, which is 9/16 at the top, and then the head of the bolt is also 9/16 underneath, so you need to make sure your deck is in the highest position. So let's get that out first. So technically you don't need to undo this bracket, however, getting that spring out, because the bracket and everything can ride with the deck, but getting that spring out, I just found it's a whole lot easier to just go ahead and loosen the bracket, and we'll deal with that once we've dropped the deck down. And the next step is going to be to remove those 3 bolts that hold on the cover that goes over the belt and the spindle, and I think they're 3/8, so let's zip those out next. Yep, just load that down. That's 2, and then there's another one around the back. Okay, with those out, now we can get that cover off. Set that aside. Now you can remove the belt. I said, we're trying to get this bracket off. If you see here, this is the cable. You can see that. And if you pull this retainer back, you can get that out of the bracket. Okay, and that gives you enough slack to unhook. To unhook the cable from the bracket, and you can leave that cable hanging down. Then this bracket is going to go with the deck and the belt. So now I'm just going to go up under here and unhook the blade belt from the back pulley, and then we're ready to get rid of the deck. If my camera will focus. So that square ring is where the belt goes through, and that's the pulley that it goes onto. So you're just going to unhook from that, and then that should leave you with all of that. So the next step then is going to be to lower the deck and get that out of the way. And the easiest way I've found to do that is to go ahead and put a large piece of cardboard under the deck, so that when you've cut it loose, it's sitting on that cardboard, and you can pull the cardboard and drag the deck out of the way, because we're going to need it completely out of the way. So to remove the deck, what we're going to need to do is remove these R clips. Okay, and that is part of this bracket, which is part of the deck. There's another one here, I can't recall, I think that one has to get removed too. Anyway, I'm going to put this camera on a tripod so I can use both hands. I'll be right back. So there are other clips. So on the left side of the mower, there's one there, and then there's another one there. So removing one of these, and this one might be easier to show you. Of course, I said that. Saw that. But that's the shape of the clip. And you do the same for that one there. So the technique to getting these out is to pull down on this side of the R clip, and then that will allow you to pull the pin out, if that makes sense. So you just put your finger on that and open the clip up, and then that will allow you to just pull the pin out sideways. So once you've got all those clips released, if you take the deck and you kind of rotate it a little bit, it'll come off the pin on the front, the pin on the other side, and then once you've got those released, you can get it off this one too. And there it is. So now it's just a question of sliding out the cardboard and getting the deck out of the way. I forgot the safety switch. This is the mulch plate or chute safety switch. So there's a plug on there, and then there's that little retainer, the that holds the wire, so we've got to get that opened up so the wire can come loose from the deck, and then get this plug out. And the best way to do that is to the best way to do that is to get a screwdriver in. That little tab there and just push the plug out. And then this retainer, well, it locks on top, so get that loose. I don't know how well you can see that, but it clips down. I can't get in there to show you. This top part locks onto that, so the way to get it apart is you take this top side and you slide it, and then it'll just release. So now we've got that released, now we can get the deck out of the way. It might hang up on a couple of things. Now I see what the issue is. It's catching on that. So I think I've just got to pick up the front of the mower and lift it over that. Okay, with that out of the way, and just for fun while we're in this situation, this is a good time to inspect the deck, so then you can make any repairs or paint. So I'm probably going to paint the inside of this where the chute rubs against it. You can also check, if you move this lever, there's actually a brake pad there. It's designed to stop the spindle when you disengage the blades, so you can check the condition of that. It doesn't look to me that that is serviceable, so it's probably going to be part of this whole bracket assembly. It looks like this block is riveted on. So, and then of course you can inspect your spindle. Now you're going to hear the blade scraping on the cardboard underneath, but you just want to make sure that there's no play in the spindle, and this one is absolutely fine. So just something to do while you're looking at the deck. Now we move on to the next step. So in order to access the belts, you're going to have to lift the mower off the ground. Now if you have a mower lift, then obviously that's the way to go, but the very least you're going to need is 4 jack stands, because like I said, you're going to have to lay on the ground and access the belt system this way, and you're going to need the mower securely lifted so it's safe. The other thing you're going to have to do, if you're using hand tools, you need to loosen this nut on the right rear tire, because we're going to have that off to service the belts. Obviously you're not going to remove the wheel with it sitting on the ground, but you're going to want to loosen the nut. If you're using the impact gun, it doesn't matter, but just get that loose before you get it off the ground. Otherwise, when you try to undo it in the air, the wheel will just spin and you'll just get frustrated. Okay, so that's just loose. Now we've got to get the mower lifted up. So jack the mower up. Doesn't really weigh that much, so I put a floor jack on. If this was a rear-wheel drive van or truck, you'd call that the pumpkin, right, the differential. So set a floor jack there, and I can put an axle stand on either side and support it under the axle. And you want to get it off as high as you can, and then on the front, so on the front you can jack it up. Now I have the counterweight because I have the bagger assembly, so I normally put my jack on this because the front end doesn't weigh anything. And then this is the frame right here, and you can put a jack stand on either side of the frame and get the mower up as high as you can. So that's it jacked up. Then I'm just going to put my jack stands right under the rear axle part on both sides. Okay. So now we have the mower up off the ground, safely supported so we can get underneath it. So next we're going to have to remove the plastic covers. Now yours has probably got 2 bolts that go under here. They're actually coarse threaded screws that screw into this plastic housing. Well, as you can see, the plastic on the inside of mine broke, so I have these NASCAR body clips. And that first panel just lifts off. This is what I was talking about. So that's the screw that you've got from the factory, but the plastic just breaks and it doesn't screw in anymore. I tried using a drywall anchor and monkeying around, but anyway, I just drilled a couple of holes and used zip ties. And that's that out of the way. And then we're going to have to get the lower panel out. These fasteners here, because that cover's got to come off. And I believe in order to do that, this bracket here, which is the bracket that holds the bagger assembly, I think that has to come off. So let me play with that real quick. That's 2 fasteners, 1 on each side, and they're 1/2 inch socket required. Alright, and I think on yours, even if you don't have this, I think this bracket needs to get out of the way anyway, so in any case you'll need to get that off. junk out while I'm there. And these two are 3/8, just like the bolts for the deck belt cover. And that's what we came for. At least that's part of it. So this is the upper belt, and then the lower belt rides in here. Now, for my money, if you're going to replace one, you might as well replace them both. I sure don't want to have to go through this again to replace this belt, even though it was the speed selector belt, drive belt, that broke. So that brings us to the subject of the belts. So here's the challenge. Obviously this is the belt that failed, and you can see it was failing in several places. Now this is a factory belt. This is the second belt that I put on it, so it came with the original belts. I put this one on, and now it's failed again after pretty heavy use. But the issue is, if you go online and you try to find the belts, the part numbers, now under the seat there's a parts list, so it gives you the parts numbers on there, but sometimes those part numbers are discontinued. So as of right now, the lower belt, which is the one that we need to replace because it broke, part number for that is 954-04331. It may also be labeled as a 754-04331, and the upper is a 954-05040, and that supersedes the part number that's on the seat, which says 954-0241A. So that is the upper belt, that is the lower belt. So if you see here, these are the factory specs for the belt. So it's 35.25 inches, that's the length of it, and it's a 0.594 width on the top of the belt for the lower belt. The upper belt is the same length, 35.25, but it's 0.656. So that's 2132s versus 1932s or 32nds. And this is where the issue comes in. If you're on any forums, or you know, reading reviews, or people are talking about belts that they bought and they're having issues with them, I found one post that said that for some reason these lawnmowers only like the factory belts, and so it's hard to imagine that a couple of 30 seconds of an inch difference would make a difference, but maybe it does. So you can buy, now I bought these belts, this is from V-Belts Guys, and on their website it gives two different part numbers, and you see on the shipping label it gives two different part numbers. One says whatever this ASTR means, and I think that means Kevlar, but what I received was two identical belts. Okay, B32 LG, which is a 5L 350 LG, which they say is 5/8 by 35 inches. So that's 1/4 of an inch shorter, and 5/8 for both of these is a little bit wider than the factory belt. Does that make a difference? Well, I don't know. If you read the complaints that people have when they install these generic belts, is they have issues with them. They're either just a little bit too short and they won't go on, or they fail prematurely, and it could be because they're just a little bit wider. So all that to say, if you're going to go through all of the aggravation of taking this mower apart to get to this point, and it's something you're going to do probably every, I don't know, 5 years, is it really worth saving the money and buying these generic ones? Now I think these two belts, I can't remember now, significantly cheaper than the factory ones. I want to say like $7 or $8 each plus shipping. So it was like, I don't know, $25 to get both of these from V-Belt guys. I looked on Amazon, didn't really have anything. I went to the MTD parts website, and both belts direct from MTD are $40 each plus shipping. Now I found the same belts. These are genuine MTD belts from Small Engine Parts Warehouse. $22 and $24 and $11 to ship them. Okay, and you'll see that they are the MTD part numbers. Okay, and they are two different belts. And these are the two belts. So this one here, we'll focus, 754-05040, which is the same as a 954. That prefix on the front doesn't make any difference. Okay, so that one is the upper belt, the one that is intact. Okay, and this one here is the lower drive belt that failed, and again their prefix is 754, but 954 is exactly the same. I think the 754 is maybe for the Cub Cadet or the Sears version, but in any case it doesn't matter. This is the lower belt, the one that broke. So you can save money by buying them. The challenge was Small Engine Parts Warehouse didn't have them in stock, so I had to wait a couple of weeks for them to order them from the MTD warehouse to them, and then they shipped them to me. So all that to say, I would go with buying the genuine parts, and then I would get them now and have them on the shelf, so that when your belt breaks right in the middle of mowing season, you're good to go, because these are extremely hard to find. Okay, so that's the belt lecture over. Actually, what I wanted to do before I moved on is I wanted to, out of curiosity's sake, now these aren't the greatest calipers, but that says 0.58 for the lower belt, 0.62 for the upper belt, and then both of these guys, 0.61 for this one. And this is what's weird, even though they're the same part numbers, this one's wider. Does it make a difference? I don't know, but I'm going to put the factory ones on, because I do not want to have to do this again. So to change this belt, and again, there's nothing really wrong with this one, but I'm going to go ahead and replace them both. There's no way to get this off don't know if you can see it back there, but it gets pinched. Against the frame right there, if you can see that. And it actually, the gap closes up as that pulley gets closer and closer to that frame there. So the only way to get this belt off, and the other one on as well, is to remove this pulley. And that's done by removing two fasteners down here, which is why this wheel has to come off. Okay. And these are 3/8 as well. So now right here it looks like you can pull this belt out without removing the pulley. And in fact I did watch a video online of a small engine mechanic doing just that. But if you see where the pulley is located at underneath the engine, and then even if you do get the belt off, getting a new one on is going to be a challenge. So for me it was just easier to remove this pulley and get the belt off and on. Super easy. There we go. So like I said, there's really not much wrong with this belt, but if you're going to do one, you might as well do them both. Okay, so the next step, and this is the deal breaker, is we've got to get this bolt out. Now this is the main engine pulley, and this is where the blade belt goes, right through here around this pulley, and then above it is where the drive belt goes. And this is the challenge that most DIYers are going to face. If you don't have an impact gun, it is possible to get this off with the breaker bar, but you're going to have to find some way of preventing the pulley from turning, because this will spin and the motor will just turn over. So you have to find some way of locking this pulley, maybe a ratchet strap or something else. I did it once by hand. I can't remember how I got it to stay in place, but by far and away the easiest thing to do is to either have an impact gun, borrow one, because it's that easy. Okay, now the pulley will just slide off. Now yours might be stuck on there a little bit. As you will see, I've got lots of grease on mine, and you might be saying to yourself, hey, that's an awfully shiny looking pulley, and that's because it's brand new, and I'll show you why. See something wrong with this? Yikes. And this too. Now that's for me trying to straighten that out, but this lip here was completely folded into that recess there, and I was like, what in the thunder? but I found an issue that you may need to be aware of, so let's go take another look at the mower. So back underneath, this is that other pulley that I was showing you. So this pulley is mounted to this bracket, and when you operate the pedal for the clutch brake, this is what you're doing, is moving this in and out. And what it does is it puts tension on the belt, and then that enables the mower to drive forwards or backwards depending on what gear you have it in with the transmission. The problem is, and what happened to mine is, let me see if I can zoom in. This bolt that holds this bracket on, it's the only thing that holds that bracket on, and it's got a great big spring here. So every time you're operating the foot pedal, this bracket is pivoting on this bolt. Now, I've replaced the bolt because all it is a hole in the deck, the frame that the engine sits on, that is tapped, and at best it's 1/4 of an inch, which means you've got like 2 or 3 threads, and then they just put that bolt into that hole. And what had happened on mine is this had come loose and it had wallowed out the threads, and then this bracket was hanging down. Let me zoom back out again. This whole bracket assembly was hanging down, and that made this pulley hit the main engine pulley. So I don't know if the big tab bent over was the result of me hitting something or something getting thrown up under here, or whether it was just simply the fact that that nut came, or that bolt came loose, and over time this bracket drooped down, allowing that pulley to interfere with the other one. But that is something to be aware of. So while you're under here, you need to check to make sure that this bolt here is tight. And again, this is going to look a little different because I had to put a nut and bolt through mine, drill it out, and that is a pain in the butt because this is the bottom of the engine. And as you can see here, there is no room to get on the other side of this bolt to put a nut. So what I ended up having to do is remove the 4 engine mount bolts, and then I used a pry bar to lift the motor off the deck sufficiently that I could get a nut and a wrench in behind here, and then I put a lock washer on it after drilling the hole out, and made a repair. But I think that can be avoided simply by making sure that this is tight, and it would save yourself the aggravation of having to buy a new pulley. So all that to say, here we are now, we're at the place where we can start putting new belts on and get this thing put back together again. So I spoke too soon. This keeper bolt has to come out. Alright, that's designed to stop the belt from being able to come off this pulley here. So that's a 3/8. It's the same as all the other keeper bolts like you have on the deck belt as well. So I'm going to pull that guy out, and then we can start routing the new lower belt on. When you go to do that, you might find that this rod is in the way, but if you just get the socket on there and just push that rod away, you can undo that bolt just fine. So that's it. bolt with a sleeve on it. Okay, so putting the upper belt on is pretty straightforward. Before I do that, so this is your speed pulley, and what you want to make sure is that this middle disc can float up and down nice and smooth. Okay, so make sure that it can operate. It should move up and down. This is what changes the speed of the drive output. So if it's sticking in any way, you'll have to take this out and clean it up. You can put a little dab of grease down in here. I would suggest putting it on a Q-tip. In fact, that's what I'm going to do, is just put a little dab in there. You don't want to get it on the pulley surfaces, obviously, because then the belts will slip. But again, we'll make sure that that is free floating nicely. So I've got just a little bit of molybdenum grease on a Q-tip, and I'm just going in here. Just make just a little coating. Oh, and of course I get it on the pulley. I'll clean it off with a rag. Now you don't have to do this, obviously, but in my mind, while you got it all apart, you might as well. Yeah, that's significantly freer. I don't know if you could tell that from before when I was operating it, but it is much better. Okay, putting the belts on. So this is the pulley that we loosened, right? The variable speed pulley. You got to get your lower belt on that first, and feed that through over that bar, right, which is the bar for raising and lowering the deck, right? That's the support rod. So go underneath. So the belt's coming in here, and we'll come back and deal with the rest of this in a minute. I went ahead and wiped all the grease off my engine shaft just because I didn't want to get any on the belt, and when I'm done I'll re-grease that when I slide the pulley back on again. I'll do that at the end, but anyway, that's the routing of it. So it's on the variable speed pulley. Now we're going to put the top belt on, and then we're going to be able to reattach it to the frame. So you just push the belt in underneath the exhaust, get it around this pulley first, and then I'm going to leave it off of here until I get this pulley bracket remounted. That gives me a little bit of slack. Again, like I said earlier, for my money, it's worth paying the little bit of extra for the OEM belts. 3/8 again. You want to be careful with all these fasteners that go into threads that are tapped into the metal of the brackets or the components you're working on, because it's all made of Chinesium and it's not very forgiving if you strip it out. So just snug it. There we go. And then that is the top belt installed. Now we've got to finish dealing with the bottom belt. Okay, so if you're here because you broke the belt and you don't have any idea how to route it, which is kind of where I'm at, there isn't really a clear direction online, but there's a keeper. This is the engage disengage pulley, and you can't get the belt through that little gap, so it seems like we have to undo this nut. Problem is, this bolt is a carriage bolt. You know, it has the domed head and it's got the square chamfer on the top. That's what holds it in place on the top side. So if you're not careful and you push up on this bolt as you loosen this nut, the bolt comes out of that square chamfer and then the whole thing just spins, and you can get your fingers in up above it to hold that bolt down while you undo this nut. But we've got to get that nut loosened enough that the bottom lip of this pulley will clear that and we can just get the belt in. I've tried forcing the belt in there, but it's just too tight. So the only way to do that is to loosen this nut, and it is a 9/16 socket. So with it loosened just enough to give it some wiggle room, there's now enough space to get that belt in behind it. You just want a coating on it, you have to go crazy. And just be careful, that edge of the cutout for the keyway is a little sharp, I can feel it. Okay, got that done. Then you'll see, if you can see in the light there, that square indent on the side of the shaft. There's a keyway down inside, and that lines up with the channel on the engine shaft. Now I'm going to have to put the camera down because I'm going to get the belt routed around that pulley. So that took a minute or two to figure out. So what I figured out is you get the belt going around this pulley here, and it'll kind of hold because that belt's so stiff, so just kind of feed that on. This is where it's coming off the speed pulley, right? You can see that here. And then it seems to be that the belt then goes around this pulley that we loosened, and then finally it's going to go around the outside of this pulley here where that keeper bolt is. So I'm going to play with figuring out what order to approach those in, and I'll be back. So the way the speed selector works is this here locks how far this pedal travels, which in turn limits how far that pulley swings, right? So to give yourself the maximum amount of space, I've got it locked in park, which means that the pulley zoom out, the pulley is furthest away from the drive pulley, the engine pulley, as it can be. Now you're going to have to move this back and forth because, as you can see right now, the nut is completely blocked by this crossbar. So if you put it in like speed 3 or something, this pulley will move over sufficiently that you're going to be able to get that nut loosened and tightened. So yeah, you can probably get right in here with it in like speed 3 or something. So anyway, this pulley is still loose, so that belt will go in there. It's routed around the top part of this pulley, and now what I'm going to do is push this up, get the bolt in, and get this around that back pulley. Actually, I might just do that now. Oh, trying to do this with one hand is a challenge. Yeah, let me get that on there and get this back in with the bolt in it, and then we'll review the routing of the belt, because I think that's what it is. Okay, I think that's correct. So it comes around the speed pulley, right? The one that we had to take the 2 bolts out to loosen up earlier. So it goes around that one, it comes off the bottom of that, and it goes around this engage pulley. If I move the light, then it goes around the engine pulley, and then on the other side it comes off the engine pulley and goes around this idler. And I believe that is the correct routing of the belt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to engage the drive and see if that's all the way it's supposed to look. So yes, I believe that is the right route, because now I just engaged the drive on top speed and everything seems to be good. So I'm going to go ahead and disengage that, make sure this is tight, put that belt keeper bolt back in here, tighten up the pulley, and that should be it. So here's the belts from the other side. It might be a little easier to see the routing. So around the top of the main pulley, the outside of this idler, up to the bottom of the speed pulley, around through this gap that we had to make while loosening that nut, and then around the back of that pulley and to here again. I hope that makes sense. I'll try to draw it out because maybe that will be easier. I believe that's the configuration, so I just put the, you can even see it, the keeper bolt is back in over here. Now I've just got to tighten up the pulley, the engine pulley, and I've got to remember to retighten that. So that should be that belt back on. Okay, so here's a quick diagram. So this is if you're underneath the mower looking upward. Okay, you got the speed pulley, goes around that idler pulley, the one that has the keeper bolt on it, goes around the engine pulley, it goes around the engage pulley, the one that moves in and out with that little black tab on the side of it that we had to loosen the pulley up to get it around, and then goes around the back of the engine, back of the speed pulley, if that makes sense. So again, this is if you're laying under the mower looking up, this is what you'd see. Right, so turning this upside down, that's the speed pulley, the idler is on the other side, the engine pulley in the middle, and I hope that helps because it was confusing to me. FYI, you're going to want to tighten that as soon as you get the belt in place, because once you have it wrapped around this pulley here, this won't move far enough to allow you to get a socket on that nut to tighten it back up again. So as soon as you get that loose and get the belt around it, go ahead and tighten that back up again, and then bring this pulley up, route the belt around there, and then around this one, and then you can finish sliding that up. And remember that the loosest this pulley is ever going to be is when you have it in park, and the tightest it's ever going to be is when you have it in high speed. Okay, so as you engage the drive, this pulley moves this way to tighten up the belts, and that's what gives you the drive. So to have the pulley in the loosest possible position, you're going to want to put it in park. So now what I've got left to do is tighten this up. I'll see if there's a torque spec, but honestly I don't know how you're supposed to torque that without having the thing on the ground, maybe with the wheels attached, I don't know. So maybe just 3 good ugga-duggas with the impact will be sufficient. Okay, so all the belts are on. Now the way this speed pulley works is as you tighten this lower belt, which is what you do when you select the speed, when you start driving the mower forward, that floating middle disc will rise up. And when it rises up, as that belt pulls in, this disc rises up, that changes the diameter of this upper pulley. It's a pretty neat design. And that then will make this belt come out, and by increasing and decreasing the diameter of this top part of the pulley, it obviously changes the gear ratio, it transfers to the transmission pulley. So that's the mechanism. So when you're selecting your gear selector switch on the front, all that's doing is adjusting how much that floating pulley is allowed to pivot in and out, and that tension then dictates how far this belt pulls in, and that then changes the gear ratio, and that's what gives you different speeds. So if anybody was wondering how that works, that's how that works. Okay, so now it's a question of putting the wheel back on, putting the deck back on, and putting the engine covers and the guard frame and all that back on, which is just the reverse of the procedure for taking it all off. Okay, the cover's back on. Just make sure you don't leave footprints. And then this is what I do whenever I take anything off. I put the bolts back in, just so you know where they came from and you don't lose track of everything. So I'm going to put this plate back on next. So a little tip, so getting this bracket back on can be a little bit of a pain, because you've got 3 holes that you've got to get lined up. So what I do is I just finagle it in and out until I can get a bolt in and get one in on either side, doesn't matter which one, and then that means that you can rotate it into the right place, and then rotate the back piece in too until you get it all lined up. Again, you just want to be really careful that you don't booger up this metal. So get them started by hand. And keep it all loose. And then when you're done, you can tighten them down. Same on this side. I think that one's pretty well lined up. Anyway, I'll play with those. I also find that a little bit of the old WD-40 helps to make those fasteners lubricated. That's why I don't use an impact gun, because you don't want to blast these home and then strip out the metal. Okay, wheel on next. I just put just a little coat of grease on there. Just makes taking it off the next time a little easier. You just got to line up the chamfer. Put that back in. That's 1/2 inch too, the same as those bolts that we just did on the back of the frame bracket there. And I'll snug that up when I get it on the ground. Okay, so now it's time to put the deck back on. And as you see, I painted this. I sanded it down, hit it with some primer, and painted just that lip there where the shroud, you know, the mulch plug or chute, whatever it is that you're using at the time, has a tendency to rub on this section here. So to stop that from rusting out, I just put some spray paint on it. Now we're going to go ahead and slide this deck back up under the mower before we lower it. Just because it makes it easier. Remember that front bracket has an issue. This is why it's easier to put it on a piece of cardboard. So you want to get it approximately lined up. So this mounting hole on the front is located on this pin here. That's where the R clip goes through, so you just want to get that lined up close enough so that when we lower the mower, it's kind of in the right place. You really just want to make sure that this bracket here is this side of that bracket there when you lower the mower. Doesn't matter, you can pick the mower up and move it over like I did when I took it off, but it just makes it easier. So now we're ready to take the jack stands out, get the mower lowered down, and get this deck back on. So on the outside, this is on the left hand side, that bracket goes onto that pin, and then on the other side there's something similar, so we've got to move this whole deck forward a little bit and keep it tilted out this way and get all three of those pins lined up. So with the front one on, you just got to get the R clip on. Just like that. And then we've got to get this one on and the one on the other side. If you come onto this side where your height selector is, you can play with this handle to get the mechanism raised and lowered and fiddle around, because you have to get them in simultaneously, so you'll figure that out. But basically the deck is out this way and both of these pins are in this direction, so it's designed that the deck can be slid on and it'll go on both pins on both sides at the same time, if that makes any sense. So then we just got to put the R clips in these guys. Okay, and the same on the other side. There we go. That's those on. Now we just have to put the belt drive mechanism back together again. And the spring. So get the tripod set up, we'll do that next. Okay. Install the spring into the bracket. Alright, it's easy to do now. And then get this loosened up. Good chance to clean this too. just going to clean that up real quick. So FYI, where this bracket mounts on that hole, if you can see this area here, this is a wear area, and if you've looked at the manual, it says to lubricate that or grease it. So I'm just going to clean that with a little bit of WD-40 and the underside of the bracket too. And there's two lines of thought with doing this. One is you're lubricating surfaces that are rubbing, but on the other hand, you could argue that grease attracts dirt, especially sand and grit, and that contributes to wear. So I don't know, but they say to put it on, so I'm just going to put just a film of it right there where that bracket spins back and forth, and then I'm going to put a little bit in that hole too, just where the nut and washer goes. Okay, so now I've got the deck at the lowest setting, so what I want to do is I want to lift it up so that I can get the retaining bolt in underneath, and then I can feed the belt to where it's supposed to go, and we're done. Okay, the bolt's through. I actually had to raise the deck up again and lower it again and just play with it to get everything where it's supposed to be. Just remember that guide rod here has to be underneath that bar. So I'm going to pull the cardboard out, raise the deck so I can get my socket under there and get that nut fastened. I just realised when I pulled the cardboard out, I found two washers. I had neglected to put those. Same on the other side. The circle pattern would be a dead giveaway, wouldn't it? That's better. I guess I'm missing one for that front bracket, so let's see if I can find one for that. Okay, all back together again. Check the operation of all the levers, they all work fine. It's one last thing can't forget to put back together again, and that is plug in the safety switch for the mulch door. So all in all, pretty hard job. Of course, in my case, it was made a lot worse by the fact that I had broken pulley to wait on, and the belt's order. So all that to say, it is doable. Fortunately, you don't have to do it very often, but certainly not a job for the faint of heart. So anyway, now I've got to get outside and mow my yard before the HOA got on me. Pete Diamond, Jacksonville, Florida. Thanks for watching.